So today I'm joined with Jarrod who is a, was it second now or third year environmental engineering student?
Second year.
Okay, and he's going to discuss with me his experiences as a student. So first of all, have you struggled with procrastination during your time at university? Or?
Yeah, of course. I think procrastination is particularly bad during online lectures and workshops when I don't have to be fully engaged 100% of the time. It's easier when I'm in a workshop working with other people. I'm engaged, and when I'm working on reports and work. But it has been a challenge.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. I think being in a lecture theatre and very much being in that zone sort of it conditions your brain to really focus, and you're less likely to sort of alt tab and check social media or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. It has its challenges, even in a sort of a lecture theatre too, sometimes if it's not as engaging content, when it's very repetitive or it's dry.
Oh, yeah.
The urge to reach over and bring up Facebook. But it's just about sort of conditioning oneself to be like, okay, I have to absorb what's going on. And that goes the same as for being at home too.
What challenges did you face as a first year student?
I think probably the biggest challenge was finding the right work-study-life balance. I started initially doing full-time university and working part-time, but I found that balance wasn't working as I was time poor and poor. So now I've gone to full-time employment, part-time study, which works better for me because it allows me at least financial independence to concentrate on my studies and be able to fully engage in the content, opposed to being stressed and anxious about financial strain.
Yeah, I certainly think that's something a lot of students who are working and studying at the same time struggle with. Like, you know, life doesn't really wait for you to finish your degree, right? You still got to pay bills.
Exactly, yeah. And those financial commitments don't go away when you go into class, and when you've got to pick between working a shift on a weekend or finishing a report, you've got to keep the lights on, and often it came down to picking work over uni. But now I spend most of my time working, and my free time's now used towards uni, and I get that right balance.
So being in your third year now?
Second.
Second. Oh. Well, to my understanding, you're studying first and second year courses over a few years. So I would say that's more of a third year course.
Yeah.
But would you say those initial courses really helped you later on in your degree, like the foundational knowledge you learned in those first year courses?
I found that the subjects I studied in first year really helped lay the foundations for good study habits. I now make sure that I lay out appropriate time for uni and reports, which I hadn't done in my first year. I sort of just went with the flow and the motions, but now I use various tools to keep everything planned out and make sure that I stick to the time I allot for various classes and projects. But also it helped teach me the skills that were now assumed later on in uni into second year. Recently I completed a project where the stipulation was you must use Harvard referencing. First year, they might say, this is what that looks like. Here's some, examples. In second year, they assume you already know that and just say, if you need help, refer to the library. Because I already had done and experienced Harvard referencing in first year, I knew how to apply that already. Where if I struggled within first year, I probably wouldn't have had that backbone in second, and I assume that will continue into third.
Yeah, referencing certainly can be a struggle for first year students, especially since faculties sort of have their favourite referencing styles and things.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So what were some of these organisational tools that you use to stay on top of your study?
Yeah, so my favourite currently is I use Google Calendar. So that's linked to my email, and I put not only when I'm at work and when I'm in class, but I also roster myself time for assessments, quizzes, reports, And even coming down to free time, doctor's appointments and other appointments, they all go on my calendar. If I get an email saying you've got to go here or do this, it automatically saves in the calendar. I have alerts. So when I know I've got a big report coming up in 4 weeks before it's due, I have an alert on my phone saying, hey, it's due in 4 weeks. So I'm constantly on top of things. Nothing's ever a surprise. And because I'm very well organized with Google Calendar, I can make sure I've got appropriate time allocated for tasks.
Yeah. And I suppose with like you working on the side as well, you can sort of get sidetracked. Well, you're worried about all that. So did you decide your major? I think you said you were studying environmental engineering. Did you decide your major early on or later in your degree? And do you think first year courses helped inform that? Or?
I entered into environmental engineering from the start. I knew that's what I wanted to do. Halfway through, though, I did have a second heart to maybe go and pursue environmental law. And I contemplated maybe switching into a double degree of law and environmental science. But I decided to stick with environmental engineering. I think first year is hard, particularly with environmental engineering, because it lays very foundational knowledge for engineering as a whole, but it's later years that you start to specialize in the stuff I'm more passionate about, environmental techniques that apply to engineering problems. And that was a little bit hard being in those classes that were very geotechnical engineering and physical world engineering heavy, when I knew that's not what I wanted to do when I graduate. But I'm sound now in where I'm going and what I want to do.
Yeah, I see what you mean. A lot of those IT courses are sort of catered towards a very specific major. Like a multimedia student might not need to be as worried about like programming or things like that, but they're still going to have to complete those first year programming courses. But sometimes it's just a matter of toughing it out, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And keeping your mind on the prize at the end of it.
Is there anything you wish you knew as a first year student in regards to study habits and exam preparation? I
think in my first year I would have really appreciated a more structured sort of example of time allocation. Going into first year, I assumed that I knew how much time I would need to be putting into projects and completely underestimated it every time. But I think more clarity around time commitment on projects in first year would definitely help with students wanting to apply that time appropriately. Maybe even having on a report, these are what we need from the report. It should take approximately 20 hours. In first year, I would be able to recognize, okay, I need to spend 20 hours. But without that knowledge, being in first year, you would easily underestimate it, especially coming straight from a high school background where it would be possible to sort of wing things out with a report. Yeah. That I think would probably really help. And having that sort of time translation on these things.
So for my final question, you and my other interviewee, you both started your degree in the middle of the pandemic. So your experience studying is going to be a lot different to many students commencing afterwards. Do you think studying in the middle of a pandemic sort of affected your experience as a student, say particularly in regards to missing that social aspect that you would ordinarily get in lectures?
It definitely did. It was an interesting time in that there were definite advantages. Working from home allowed me to spend more time on reports instead of spending it in a car commuting. I live on the Central Coast, so I spent an hour driving to uni and an hour driving back. During the pandemic, that was 2 more hours I could put towards a project or have free time. But I had very little to no engagement with classmates. Particularly, I had a class with a weekly workshop that we would use at like a virtual classroom and every week without fail, I'd enter into a classroom with other people that were in complete silence. And I would spend time, at least 15 minutes in some cases, changing room after room until I found someone who was actually talking and engaged. I ended up making, I would probably say, acquaintances with my classmates in a particular room that week after week we would sort each other out. We would never know what each other looked like, so we would never know who we are in real life if we walked past each other in the street. But we knew our names, and we would find each other in the room, would work together on solving problems week after week, and would always be in that one room to work. So we sort of made it work. It wasn't ideal, but we made it work.
I'd like to thank you for just joining me and doing this interview with me. I respect that you've got a long commute and it's not easy coming down here. And yeah, thanks for your time.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.